Welcome to the infamous edition of the Headstones and Microphones, where we use AI to step into the past through a researched first-person simulation done through creative storytelling of history's most infamous people. Now, let's meet our guest. Welcome to the podcast. Let's start at the absolute beginning, where the public narrative hasn't yet distorted who you were. When and where were you born, and what was your given name?
I was born Giuseppe Carlo Bonanno on January 18, 1905, in the seaside town of Castellammare del Golfo, nestled right there in Sicily, Italy. To my family, I was simply Giuseppe.
What was your hometown and home life like as a child?
Castellammare was a beautiful but old-world place, governed by ancient traditions and close family ties. My parents, Salvatore Bonanno and Catherine Bonventry, came from well-regarded traditional clans. When I was just 3 years old, they brought me across the ocean to the United States, and we lived in Brooklyn for about 10 years. But by the time I was a young teenager, we moved right back to Sicily, so my upbringing was always split between the bustling streets of New York and the rigid, honor-bound culture of my homeland.
Was there a story behind your name or a nickname that stuck with you?
Oh, the American press saddled me with a name that I absolutely despised. Joe Bananas. They thought it was clever, a play on my last name, but to me, it sounded cheap and disrespectful. In our world, among those who actually knew and respected me, I was called Don Pepino. That was a title born out of tradition and status, not a media circus.
What were you like as a child, and how many years of schooling did you actually attend?
I was a disciplined boy, raised to value tradition, self-control, and the heritage of my family. I didn't care for the unruly behavior you see in common street thugs. I actually pursued a formal education while back in Italy, studying at a nautical college in Palermo. I valued learning and structure, which prepared me to handle complex affairs later in life.
Was there a specific moment when you realized you were fundamentally different from everyone else?
It wasn't so much a sudden realization as it was an evolution. Growing up amidst the traditions of Castellammare, I realized early on that I possessed a deep sense of discipline and a clear understanding of loyalty that many around me lacked. I saw myself as a man capable of sticking to firm principles, a trait that naturally set me apart from the average man who simply floats with the wind.
What's a decision that changed everything for you, but felt small at the time?
In 1924, I made the choice to slip back into the United States illegally. Benito Mussolini's regime was cracking down hard on traditional families like mine in Sicily, and I refused to live under his thumb. I stowed away on a Cuban fishing boat bound for Tampa, Florida, alongside Peter Magaddino. It felt like a necessary escape at the time, a young man seeking freedom, but it ultimately set the entire trajectory for my life in the American underworld.
Let's talk about your early run-ins with the law. Before the world knew your name for your most infamous actions, what was your very first arrest or interaction with law enforcement? And what were the consequences?
Right after I stepped off the train in Jacksonville, Florida, following my illegal entry, immigration officers detained me. It could have ended my American dream right then and there. But my uncle, Giovanni Bonventre, arranged for my granduncle, Stefano Magaddino, to bail me out for $1,000. I was released, and I made my way to New York, where I briefly worked in a bakery and even took acting classes before diving into the bootlegging business.
At what moment did you realize your name would never be forgotten?
It became entirely clear during the Castellammare War in the early 1930s. I was a chief aide to Salvatore Maranzano, and when the dust settled from that bloody conflict, the old bosses were gone and a new structure was born. In 1931, at just 26 years old, I was named the boss of my own family. To be given the reins of an entire empire at such a young age, that was the moment I knew my name would be etched into history.
Did fame make you more dangerous, or did it simply expose who you already were?
I never sought out cheap fame. The media forced it upon me. I don't believe it made me dangerous, because true power doesn't come from a loud reputation. It comes from self-control and organization. What the public called dangerous was simply me maintaining order, tradition, and stability within our family during a time when the world around us was chaotic.
Who do you believe betrayed you first? A person, society, or your own instincts?
It was a mixture of shifting loyalties within our own world and the changing times. In the 1960s, internal revolts broke out, leading to what the press called the Banana War. My own close associate and capo, Gaspar di Gregorio, turned against me, which shattered the harmony of our family. That internal fracturing, driven by greed and a lack of the old-school loyalty I held dear, was the true betrayal.
What was your most unique habit or a random fact about you that would surprise people?
People picture a man in my position constantly surrounded by violence, but they would be surprised to know that I had a deep appreciation for the arts and quiet life. After returning to New York as a young man, I actually enrolled in acting classes near Union Square. I enjoyed the discipline of performance and the study of human behavior.
What did the public never understand about the pressure you were under at the time?
The public looked at us through the lens of sensationalized newspaper headlines. They didn't understand that what we called the mafia wasn't a corporate entity of crime, but a process, a form of clan cooperation built on friendship, connections, family ties, trust, and obedience. Managing those intricate human relationships and keeping the peace while federal law enforcement was constantly knocking at the door was an unimaginable weight.
Did you have any known rivalries that defined your career?
My career was defined by navigating complex relationships with other powerful leaders on the commission, like Lucky Luciano, and later, the ambitious bosses who wanted to reshape our world in the 1960s. But in my later years, my primary adversary became the federal government itself, specifically prosecutors like Rudolph Giuliani, who used my own words and history to try and dismantle what we had spent decades building.
What personal battles were you fighting privately while the world was watching?
In my later years, as the government relentlessly pursued me into my retirement, I had to battle severe decline in my physical health. I suffered from a variety of ailments, including a stroke that severely limited my ability to read and enjoy my quiet days. Fighting the government in courtrooms while simultaneously fighting my own failing body was a long, private struggle.
What was your darkest moment, and was there ever a time you wanted to walk away from it all?
The mid-1960s was incredibly dark. During the height of the internal power struggles and pressure from the Commission, I vanished for nearly 19 months starting in 1964. The world thought I was kidnapped or worse, but it was a time of immense isolation and transition. Ultimately, by 1968, I did choose to walk away. I officially retired and removed myself from the New York chaos entirely, moving out west to Arizona.
What truth was hardest to escape when you were alone at night?
I always lived with a clear conscience because I operated by a strict code of honor. The hardest truth to accept, however, was that the golden age of our traditions was dying. The younger generation didn't value the old ways of respect and loyalty. They were consumed by rapid greed, and watching the foundation of what we built erode from the inside out was a tough reality to face.
When the law finally closed in, how exactly were you brought to justice? Walk me through the final arrest, the charges that ultimately stuck, and the legal outcome of your trials.
For decades, New York authorities could never make anything serious stick to me. But in Tucson, Arizona, the FBI kept a close eye on me. They went through my trash and used wiretaps, claiming I was still running things. In 1980, I was convicted of obstruction of justice and served about 8 months in prison. Then, in 1985, Rudolph Giuliani had me jailed for 14 months for contempt of court because I refused to testify against other family leaders, citing my poor health.
What's the craziest rumor ever told about you? And what part of your story has been exaggerated the most?
The entertainment world loves to romanticize or exaggerate our lives. People often say that I was the primary direct model for Marlon Brando's character, Vito Corleone, in the Godfather films. While there may be structural similarities in how we valued family and tradition, Hollywood added plenty of its own dramatic flair.
What is the biggest misconception people have about your life?
The biggest misconception is that we were just common criminals or gangsters. I always viewed myself as a venture capitalist, a traditionalist, and a protector of my culture. I wrote my autobiography, A Man of Honor, specifically to correct the folklore and explain that we operated under a philosophy of mutual aid and respect, not random lawlessness.
What would surprise people most about your ordinary human side?
People would be surprised by how peaceful and domestic my life actually was after I left New York. I lived in Tucson, Arizona for over 30 years in a regular neighborhood, attending church, reading books, and spending time with my wife Faye and our children. I enjoyed the quiet desert sun just like any other retiree.
When, where, and how did you pass away?
I passed away on May 11th, 2002, at a hospital in Tucson, Arizona. I was 97 years old, and the cause of death was heart failure.
Was your downfall caused more by your own flaws or by the world changing around you?
The world changed entirely around me. The old world values of Sicily and the early days of Brooklyn were completely replaced by a modern, fast-paced society that didn't respect history or the codes we lived by. My retirement and legal troubles were a result of the government changing its tactics and the younger generation abandoning the rules of the past.
What past regrets did you carry with you to the end? If you could erase one decision from your life, would you? Or was it necessary to become who you were?
I believed that it takes many stepping stones for a man to rise, and none can do it entirely unaided. Every decision I made was necessary to protect my family and preserve our way of life during an incredibly volatile era in American history. I stood before my loved ones near the end and noted that I was there because God loved me, and with the gift of God, how could I go wrong?
What scared you more? Getting caught, losing power, or being forgotten?
None of those things scared me. I never feared losing power because true strength comes from within, from self-control, and a clear conscience. And I certainly never feared being forgotten. I knew exactly what I had built and the mark I left on the 20th century.
When you look back now, do you see yourself as the villain, the hero, or something in between?
I see myself exactly as I titled my own story, a man of honor. I operated within the rules of the world I was given, protecting my people and sticking firmly to my principles from the beginning to the very end.
Do you have any closing remarks about the interview or the stories you shared that you would like to share with the listeners before we sign off?
Just remember that history is rarely as simple as the headlines make it out to be. True wealth isn't found in notoriety. It comes from a good family, good friends, and lifelong loyalty. Keep your connections strong and respect your heritage.
And that wraps up another conversation from Beyond the Grave. Thanks for joining us on the Headstones and Microphones podcast. Remember, do better with the life you have been given and choose to do good in this life. Please help spread the word by sharing and following the pod.